On this episode,
You can't find who Jack the Ripper is because he or she is not one person.
Those are the 5 most accepted, I guess, that were within Jack the Ripper.
Generally accepted.
Right.
Yeah.
It's so wild, the parallels between the Jack the Ripper saga and the Zodiac, right?
If anybody ever tells you that they know who Jack the Ripper is, they're either lying to you or they're trying to sell a book.
That's it. That's how you create some intrigue to get going.
Raise your glass to mysteries, cocktails and conspiracies. Dive into these histories, cocktails and conspiracies. Raise your glass to mysteries, cocktails and conspiracies. Uncover those anomalies, cocktails and conspiracies.
In the shadowy streets of Victorian London, a figure cloaked in darkness roamed free, leaving behind a trail of terror that still haunts the imagination today. Who was Jack the Ripper? A mere man? Or something more sinister? As the fog rolled in over Whitechapel, the whispers of fear grew louder, echoing through the alleys where innocence met brutality. With every gruesome murder, the Ripper taunted the authorities, slipping through their fingers like smoke. His identity, shrouded in enigma, has sparked countless theories and investigations, captivating the minds of amateur sleuths and professional historians alike. Was he a local butcher, a member of the aristocracy, or perhaps even someone closer to home than anyone dared to believe? Join us tonight as we delve into the chilling world of Jack the Ripper, peeling back the layers of myth and fact to uncover the truth behind the legend. Pour yourself a drink, settle in, and let the mysteries of the past unfold as we navigate this dark tale on Cocktails and Conspiracies. Good morning, good evening, wherever you may be, whether you are tuning in across the nation or around the world. My name is Shane Squarick, here, as always, with my esteemed co-host, Mr. I'm not yelling. I'm not blowing the eardrum out. Phillips! And tonight,
Yo, buddy.
we are joined by the guy who was supposed to be our very first guest about a year ago, and we finally made it happen, Mr. Tom Butters. Cheers, my friend. Welcome. to
Cheers.
Cocktails
Good to see you
and
guys.
Conspiracy.
Shane,
Welcome, Mr. Butters.
love to be with you.
Well, I say that
Glad
we
we
tried
can
to
make
get
this happen.
like literally a year ago, Tom.
Yeah, you don't even want to know what I've gone through in the last year, so you don't want to know.
It's a lot. It's a lot
Yeah.
of conspiracy, I'm sure.
Yep.
So when we were in the infancy of this,
Yeah.
Tom, you and I talked quite a bit about just like fun little conspiracies outside of fantasy football talk and work related stuff. We always talked about some conspiracies, and you let me on to your deep dark secret that you were basically an amateur ripperologist. Am I saying that correctly?
Yeah, you're 100% saying it correctly, especially the amateur part. But yeah,
Well, we're all
That's okay. We're amateur
professional in our
podcasters.
ways.
yeah.
So at what point do you find, the fascination begins for you with Jack the Ripper?
Oh, it's always been it's always been something that's important to me. My fantasy football name is Jack the Ripper, and Jack the Ripper wins. And then I know what I'll do is I'll send a map out to everybody in fantasy football with Jack the Ripper's killing, but I'll change the names of the victims to the names of the fantasy. So it's been there for quite some time. I think it really started in earnest around 2002. So I just turned 40, and I was thinking, you know what? I'm not doing enough to invigorate my mind. So what I did was I got together 5 people who I felt were really intelligent, who are totally different than me, and we set up this little group to study Jack the Ripper.
That's wild.
Yeah, so we all had all the victims. We had files of all the victims. I can show you that in a moment. Like, oh, there they are. So we had files. I found them from 2003 because I've kept them. They've been that important. So they're the victims.
No kidding.
Or potential.
Wow, look at this.
Yeah, potential victims, right? And then of the at the time there were probably 30, maybe 40 viable suspects. Now people think there are 500 viable suspects.
We'd narrow it down.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
And so we investigated, and then we'd meet at the bar and talk about what we learned, and it just grew. It just really grew from there. And if you want to know how many, I can tell you exactly how many suspects there are, and that's because I used to be not a competitive cyclist, but an avid cyclist.
Okay.
And the old adage with cycling is, how many bikes should you own? And the answer is N plus 1. So N is the number of bikes you have now, and 1 is how many you have. So, like, from a suspect perspective, it's N plus 1. How many are there now? Plus 1. I have my own theories.
That wild, huh?
Yeah. I mean, but some of these people they're Lewis Carroll, they're Queen Victoria. There's all sorts of like crazy people. Like, I mean, there's crazy ideas and that. And there's one thing with Lewis Carroll. I mean, who wrote Alice in Wonderland. There's some people who felt that Alice in Wonderland was an explanation of the Ripper murder. So it's like crazy stuff. I mean, you can see whatever you want to see, basically.
Now, Tim, when Tom said 2002, I saw your hand kind of jerk up in the air. Why? Is there a reason?
That was a simple, I beat you. So I was 1997, but the big difference is I was only 10 years old. So I was not forming a research group and sitting at the bar. I was
hopefully not sitting at the bar.
I was 10. No. I think I told this story on here before, but I was 10 years old. My aunt was living and working in London at the time. And that summer of 1997, it would have been, I went to visit her for like a week. And one of the attractions that we went and we saw that I begged her, and my grandmother was with us as well. One of the attractions that we went to was something called the London Dungeon, which I thought was going to be just a cool kind of wax museum, kind of centralized around dungeons or castles, right? What I didn't know is that I would get the living shit scared out of me, and that it was not just a wax museum, but it was a full-blown haunted house with jump scares and actors walking around, and they bring you, when they start the whole tour, they bring you into this room, and there's a judge sitting high up, and you're on trial as Jack the Ripper. They're accusing you of being Jack the Ripper, and the whole thing is about the Ripper murders. And I was it scared the living shit out of me, like I said, to the point where we literally, my aunt had to like go off to the side and say, hey, like, I got a 10-year-old kid, he's freaking out, like, we need to get out of here, could you please, like, stop it and let us just leave, and which they did. But that was my first introduction to Jack the Ripper, and then after that very traumatizing experience, I just became enamored with it. I loved anything and everything Jack the Ripper, anything I can get my hands on. I haven't done quite the extensive research, especially, I know you call yourself an amateur, you're certainly much more professional than I am. I just like to read books on it.
You don't know me, ask Shane.
Ask
Shane. No, you don't know me.
But,
he's a bigger pro than
that's
he
where
gives
it started
himself
for me.
Yeah. Yeah,
that's where it started for me.
I mean, you know what? I mean, it's the mystery of it all, right? I mean, you guys did the Zodiac Killer, which is, I think, the American comparison to Jack the Ripper.
I was gonna say Jack's the original, right? With the Dear Boss letters. I mean, that was all obviously hundreds of years pre-Zodiac. He's the original Zodiac.
And I have my whole theory on this, right? Like, first of all, if anybody ever tells you that they know who Jack the Ripper is, they're either lying to you or they're trying to sell a book. Yeah. I mean, nobody really knows who Jack the Ripper is. Now, I have very specific opinions, but they could be totally wrong, and I'm not going to share them right now. I'm going to share them later in the show.
That's it. That's how you create some intrigue to get going. Before we start, I'm going to ask you one technical question.
Yeah.
Grab the tip of your mic, just pull it down and down, down and out. There you go. Perfect. Don't even move.
Down and out? Like.
There we go. Down and out. Perfect.
Just like my life?
Just like your life. Down and out, Tom. Now you got to kick back out. So I'm assuming that most people coming here have heard of Jack the Ripper. It's one of the biggest legacies of all time. However, myself included, don't really know the historical context around Jack the Ripper outside of somebody that ran around and killed a bunch of women in England. Tom, give me just an overview. It doesn't have to be professional. It doesn't have to be really that coherent, but just a summary of who Jack the Ripper is and kind of what he did, why he became notorious.
And Tom's only had one drink so far.
Sorry, you like
the cocktails.
You want to take back you want it to be coherent, don't you?
I guess maybe a little more coherent.
Okay,
yeah,
more
yeah.
coherent.
But I like that. I like that. That works.
So the Jack the Ripper murders occurred sometime between, and I'm going to say that because we don't necessarily know who the exact victims of Jack the Ripper were. So sometime like this is in like in stone. Sometime between 1887 and 1891 in the very slums of Whitechapel in London, England. At that point in 1987-89, London was the largest city in the world. So it wasn't until a couple of decades later that New York passed London as the largest city in the world, and then then it was Mexico and Tokyo, etc. But at that time, like we're talking like 1888. We're 6 years out of the OK Corral. Like just 6 years, right? The gunfight at OK Corral is 1882, I believe. It might be 1881, but I mean it's in that vicinity. So we're like, think about what that is in that. I mean that's in Kansas and in the Midwest. So London is a bustling shithole, especially Whitechapel. Like Whitechapel is where all the poorest of poor go. Lots of immigrants, and a lot of what they call ill-fortunates, right? So these ill-fortunates, if they were women and they enjoyed, okay, time for a drink. Everybody, we got a drink.
Cilantro.
Oh,
That's it.
Part of the
you know
story
what?
There.
Yep.
Tom is joining. I don't give a shit whether Tom knows anything about any other subject we ever cover. He's coming on every fucking episode.
Yeah, I can do that. I can help you guys drink. So the thing is, there's a lot of individuals when they a lot of immigrants into London, a lot of at this point in time, deviants as well as individuals who may have fallen on hard times due to alcoholism, etc., like that type of thing, and Whitechapel was the center in London for like a red light district, but you don't have lights on. Like, and think about this. This is 1988.
Right.
It's all gas light. We don't have there's not electric light at this time. The areas are all incredibly dark, and if you're a prostitute, a seamstress is what they like to be called at that time. if you were a seamstress and you wanted to meet a gentleman, neither of you want to be doing this under a light. So the whole fact of who they are and what they had to do was very much in the shadows. And I'm not talking about like metaphorically. I'm talking about literally.
Quite
it
literally.
was done in the shadows. So these people are insanely vulnerable. And during the time that I've mentioned, from 1887 to 1891, there were at least 18 murders of unfortunate women in the Whitechapel area. 18.
Right, it wasn't uncommon.
It wasn't uncommon at all.
Yeah. Think about the biggest slum today in America or anywhere out the world. Like that was Whitechapel back then.
Yeah, but you can. I mean, it's so far lower than that. It's not funny.
Right.
People worked in what was called workhouses, right? And they were just slaved, and then they stayed in lodge housing. And the movie From Hell from 2001, they did a really good job of illustrating that. I don't agree with the story necessarily. The timing is all wrong. However, I think they really painted an excellent picture of what it was. And these women, they had to pay to be tied up like in a rope against the wall to sleep. And they had to pay
That's
that.
insane.
And they had to pay for that. And they had to go and prostitute themselves for as little money as possible just so they had a place to sleep. I mean, it was a very nasty place. But like what people don't understand, I mean, what a majority of people I don't think understand is that London was the largest city in the world, and Whitechapel was a cesspool.
So is
Well put.
prostitution effectively widely accepted? I'm using the word accepted, but obviously not accepted. But everyone knows it goes on. There's no real negative connotation to it necessarily. It's just a way for some of these people to survive. Is that a fair assumption at this period?
I think basically I'm not necessarily. I mean, from my readings, I think it's more or less of like, stop that, get along now. Like you have your
Right.
baton,
Right.
and you're like, stop that, get along
Just
now.
kind of look
It
the
was
other
only
way.
when they became belligerent if they were drunk, either
Right.
the John or the Pro, right? Like then they would have an issue with the police.
Okay.
It was one of those
One of-
slap on the wrist things.
Yeah,
Right.
move along now.
Right. One of the things that we did when we talked about the Zodiac, because there's such a wide array of timelines, much like Jack the Ripper, and people have different opinions on where it all began and where it all ended and who's included in what. We tried to really narrow it down and set parameters. You said 1887 to 1891. I'm happy working within that time frame. For you personally, whether you want to just discuss it or whether this is your belief, what's that first murder and what's the final murder, if you can answer that? And then we'll start to work within that frame.
I would like to answer this, but it might be a little longer than you may
That's okay.
desire.
Is it bigger than the canonical 5?
I don't believe in the canonical 5.
Oh,
I don't even know what that
baby.
is, so it doesn't really matter to me.
I'm gonna love this rabbit hole. Bring me down, Tom. Bring me down. Let's go.
Right, okay. So the Zodiac Killer, you know who they are, because he came out and he said, "I'm the Zodiac," and they're
Well,
okay.
well,
Well, the
well,
thing
we
is,
argue a little bit on that. Yes,
no,
but yes,
and
I
there
know what you're
should be
saying.
argument about that. In my opinion, of the canonical 5, 3 of them were killed by somebody referenced as Jack the Ripper, and 2 were killed by their significant others. I also believe that Martha Tabram, who isn't part of the canonical 5, but is just a couple of weeks before, I believe she was the first murder. So in my opinion, and I don't think Jack the Ripper is one person.
Okay, so time out.
However, I do believe Jack the Ripper is part of a conspiracy.
Well, that's where I want to go. But before we go there, I want to just define now. The canonical 5 is Mary Ann Nichols, Annie Chapman, Elizabeth Stride, Catherine Eddowes, Mary Jane Kelly. Is that
Correct.
the assumption?
And
Those are the ones that are in
Mary Ann
canon.
Nichols is called Polly. Like, I mean, everybody calls
Yes.
her
Polly.
Polly.
Okay.
Polly
Pol-
Nichols.
Polly
Like Polly
Nichols
want a cracker.
Was considered the first of the canonical 5. I believe
Okay.
she was the second of the canonical 5.
Okay. So before we get into that, that's just for our audience's sake. Again, this is most of Jack the Ripper's lore is new to me. Those are the 5 most accepted, I guess, that were within Jack the Ripper.
Generally accepted.
Right.
Yes.
Okay.
And
Now go.
again, if anybody says to you that they know who Jack the Ripper is, they're either lying or trying to sell a book.
Well, that seems to be a lot of things in conspiracy realm over here, Tom. So you don't think it started with Polly, Mary Ann Nichols. You said it started with
Martha Tabram.
Martha Tabram. Why?
Because of my theories, and I'm just going to pull out some because I've got notes here, right?
Well, this is one of the things I really want to accent tonight. You showed us your folders too. For those that aren't watching this, maybe you're just listening to it in the car, I do encourage you to check out the video at some point on youtube.com/@conspiracyrealist. But see Tom's bookshelves worth of content and all of his different. There's more research and everything. He's got a whiteboard that's got everything written up. That's like August 1888.
He's got a calendar from the 1800s.
All right, let's turn the floor back over to you. I want you to tell me where this starts why you think that, and then if we remember, why this might be the first one that happens. So, floor is yours. We might interject a couple more times.
And that's great. One thing that I'm not sure many people of the ripperology are aware of is all the canonical murders occurred on the weekend.
I didn't realize that.
I know. That's why you need a calendar. I can send you one of mine.
Sounds like a website idea.
So what is the significance of that?
Well, I mean, there's okay. The biggest questions in my mind with Jack the Ripper is, when did they start? When did they finish? Why did they finish? Those are the questions that I want to know. When did they start? When did they finish? And why did they finish? And it's very interesting, and there's a lot of other dates that we can go into at another time. And we could have a whole other, when I drop a bomb, we could have a whole other episode on that. The thing is, after Mary Kelly died, right, or was killed, who I don't think is part of Jack the Ripper, but anyway, I mean, and I'll give you the dates like as we progress. I think Mary Kelly was killed by Joseph Barnett, who was her significant other. I think Liz Stride, the first person of the double murder, was killed by Michael Kidney, her boyfriend. And I think there's a lot. I think there's more people that believe that Liz Stride was killed by Michael Kidney than Mary Jane Kelly was killed by Joseph Barnett. But that's neither here nor there. So the killings start I think in the beginning of August. So Martha Tabrams died on August 7th, and this is a Tuesday for those of you who are counting in my calendar. However, August 6th was the bank holiday. So she was killed over the night, like the last evening of the weekend, right?
Okay.
And then you've got Polly on the 31st. You've got Annie Chapman on the 8th. Someone called Susan Ward was attacked but not killed on September 15th. And then you've got the double murders on September 30th, Elizabeth Stride and Catherine Eddowes. Now, Catherine Eddowes, I think it was killed by whomever Jack the Ripper is, and I think it's multiple people. But anyway, but there is a conspiracy to the multiple people.
Okay.
And then Mary Jane Kelly died, was killed on November 9th, Friday, November 9th. And within a week, all the police were gone. Like they had extra people, extra police officers in Whitechapel. And within a week, they weren't there anymore. The extra cops were all pulled off.
Within a week of Mary Kelly's
death, yeah. Now, Mary Kelly's death is November 9th. Very important date to remember because of the conspiracy aspect that I think you guys are going to love.
Okay.
So Martha Tabrams, if you agree with the fact that it is one killer, and this killer has escalated because he's no longer getting the enjoyment of just killing somebody, and it goes more and more. So that's the typical theory behind what Jack the Ripper was. That he just I'm not getting my kicks anymore. I gotta totally rip this whole thing out.
They become more and more gruesome.
Yeah, right. So even if you think Stride doesn't fit that. Stride was stabbed,
Yeah.
like many times, right? And then Catherine Eddowes, which was, and everybody wants to talk about it's like 15 minutes away. You just almost like if you were to believe the double murder theory, you've got somebody who almost got caught killing somebody, and they went, no, I'm not going to go home. I'm going to go try to kill somebody else. I mean, it's just like basically it doesn't make. I mean, I know these people like whomever is responsible is not in their right mind. However, it just doesn't make to me. It never made a whole lot of sense. And Michael Kidney was the boyfriend of Liz Stride, and they were fighting like crazy. So I just think it was I think Michael Kidney took the publicity, and that's a big key to Jack the Ripper, because we're talking, guys, 18 people in a year and a bit.
Right.
18 women. But we are really concentrating on August to November 1888, right?
Right.
That's the concentration is. So why do these 5 murders, which are, I mean, with the exception of Eddowes and Mary Kelly, are basically the same kind of gruesome as 16 of the other ones? Why are these so ingrained in society? And that's because of the newspapers. And the newspapers started really doing Saucy Jack, all of this kind of issue, and they raised the profile of these killings.
Right.
Now, in my opinion, and I'm going to drop a segment now, then you guys can go for a drink or smoke or anything. Like, I believe it could be one of two solutions. The one solution I think it could be is it was orchestrated by the police.
It's an interesting one.
Before we go to the why, what's the other
No,
solution?
we're gonna do that later, because the dates work perfectly if it's the police.
Do you want to cover that first? Or you want to talk about both ideas?
Well, what's the other one? Tell us what the other one is first.
Well, the other one could be hand in hand with the police, because I believe the police used mentally insane criminals to set them on to people. So
interesting.
The person that I would put the number on is a gentleman by the name of David Cohen, who's also, as we mentioned a little bit earlier, Nathan Kosminski, when Anderson, the assistant commissioner, said that it was Kosminski, everybody looked at Kosminski, but that's just some white guy mispronouncing a Jewish Polish name, and I believe it was David Cohen Kosminski was the individual. If you look at, and I want to go into the dates like a little bit later in it, because the dates are pretty interesting. If you go and look at the four police that are involved are James Monroe and Charles Warren are the leads in this. So James Monroe,
They were the lead detectives?
no, they were
We're talking about those were the lead suspect. Okay, go ahead.
They were adversarial, assistant commissioners of the police. Adversarial. So,
Adversarial in what way?
Got it.
let's go. I'll read them, because I'm going to read my notes here, okay? So Charles Warren. Let's start with James Monroe, because I think James Monroe could be the head guy. So James Monroe was an assistant commissioner of the CID from 1884 to, get this, August 1888.
Okay. Now, what's the CID?
I like that.
The CID is, I'll have to look it up.
I can look this up as well. What is the CID? Thank God for the world's information here. The Criminal Investigation Department in the United Kingdom. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Very
Okay.
obvious right there.
Yeah.
CID. Got it.
Okay. So he was passed over for the commissioner of the CID by a gentleman by the name of Charles Warren.
Okay.
So Charles Warren is Monroe's boss. So Monroe started in 1884, Warren started in 1886, and he took the job of the commissioner in 1886.
I like where this is going.
Okay, great. So Monroe resigns. He has a fight with Warren, and he resigns in August 1888.
Interesting. Okay.
Okay. Charles Warren then puts Robert Anderson, who seems to be not involved in this conspiracy, but Warren puts Anderson into Monroe's position, and Charles Warren, who is the boss of Monroe and Anderson, and before Monroe resigns, he resigns on November 8th, 1888. And who becomes commissioner? James Monroe.
He comes back in and becomes commissioner, even though he's resigned already.
So this conspiracy aspect of that is that Monroe leaves. He's pissed at Warren. He leaves, and then he starts. And murders happen all the time here, but Monroe has an old buddy who's now an assistant CID, and that's Melville McNaughton. Now Monroe saved McNaughton.
What a name!
I know. Monroe saved McNaughton's life when they were attacked in India.
So he feels like he owes him something.
I don't know. I'm just saying. I'm just giving you some facts.
Good, yeah.
Yeah. So McNaughton's now CID, assistant director, and McNaughton then has a friend in the press.
Okay.
So these murders now become big and be part of the press, released to be part of the we're talking 18 women died in a year and a half, and we're talking about 5.
The
right. So to your point, why are we focusing on the 5?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Jake.
Exactly.
Right.
So
well, I was going to ask him, the friend of the press, Tom. Is this the press? Like, I don't know if it's like today where there's multiple different publicity outlets, and even like the 70s for the Zodiac case, you had multiple different papers, but they were generally regionalized. The press here, this friend, is he working in the press that is covering the story of Jack the Ripper?
Well,
so there's a direct benefit for him to publish the story.
Is he covering it, or is he making it up? Right. I mean, that's the whole point, right?
Is he? From the official narrative, is he covering it? I guess
reporting on it.
Question.
Yes, he is reporting on it.
Okay.
Now,
so there's a direct correlation there.
Now, some of the letters that they receive, right, the police receive, are very well written. Not the not like their boss, right, or whatever. Like some of them are insanely well written, and seem to have some kind of education to them, and that's why like the whole thing of Jack the Ripper, like, is an educated person comes out. Now, McNaughton has access to prisoners or knows people. Mm-hmm. So one of my theories, and again, if anybody tells you that they know who Jack the Ripper is, they're lying. But this is one of my theories, right? So they planned these murders to make Warren look bad.
Right.
And the whole dates are really funky, right? Everybody says, "Oh, we can dismiss the dates." Well, I'm not saying Charles Warren killed these people. Sorry, James Monroe. Killed these people. I'm saying that he got somebody, maybe Melville.
He orchestrated it
to assist them. And so when they say that, like, there's Druitt is one of the main suspects. He drowned. Mm-hmm. He went insane and drowned in the lake, and then Kosminski, Kazminski, not Kosminski, David Cohen. He caught.
You're talking about David, yeah.
David Cohen. So David Cohen, which is Aaron Kazminski. He caught syphilis in March of '88. And he went crazy, and he was hospitalized in November, like taken away into the insane asylum in November of 1888, and passed away the following year. So I mean, to say that Jack the Ripper is one person, I don't think, and I think that's why people are confused a little, because oh no, this person's a lefty, this person's a righty, this person has like like there are fishmongers that are considered suspects, and there's other people. So it's sort of like well, you can't find who Jack the Ripper is because he or she is not one person. There are many
Right.
people.
Right. It's so wild, the parallels between the Jack the Ripper saga and the Zodiac, right? Just thinking back to the episode, Shane, that
It's
you and
almost
I
a
covered
copycat.
on that. It's so similar, especially the theory that Tom is describing right now. When I think about what you described pertaining to the Zodiac, I mean, dude, it's fucking hand in hand.
So to get
Just
some
hundreds of
context
years
on that,
apart.
to you, Tom, and to our audience who haven't watched that Zodiac Killer episode, go back on our YouTube channel, Spotify, Rumble, or X. You could check that out. Basically, when we started with the Zodiac Killer, I was very well invested in this for many, many years. I was to Zodiac what you and Tim are both to Jack the Ripper. I've been obsessed with the case. I've went through every person from top to bottom. I bought into who they were, and then there was always
Robert
something
Downey
that didn't sit
Jr.,
with me.
man. It's
Robert Downey Jr. Yep. So there's recent documentaries that came out that were talking about Arthur Lee Allen's back up on there. And the one thing that always sat uneasy with me is he had the opportunity to come clean. And the Zodiac was always somebody that seemed to embrace the publicity of it. And he swore on his deathbed that it wasn't him. He had a confessional letter that it wasn't him.
Right.
And so that always sat wrong with me until I came across the theory that the Zodiac didn't exist at all. And so in that episode, we dissected each of the murders, and what we found was that there was nothing that was consistent amongst them, except that it happened to be a murder in a general vicinity. Now, as you go down the rabbit hole further, there's, just like Jack the Ripper, there's those core murders that are attributed to the Zodiac Killer. But outside of those, before, there's a couple that kind of thread a needle and connect them all, but there's a bunch after, and they're all published in the San Francisco Chronicle, and then the murders stop, and then there's just letters. And what it came to be is a gentleman that worked for a newspaper, a reporter, I can't think of the name off the top of my head, but he was known to be a bit of a weasel. It's highly suspected that he was crafting these letters himself to sell newspapers. And even before that, a lot of the letters, like even the taxi cab murders, there were taxi cab murders all the time, right?
Yeah.
Even that, like, what was happening is people think about a lot of these cases sometimes in the context of today. Today, a reporter would never have access to evidence. Back then, the reporter, and this is just the 70s, so I imagine the 1800s, the late 1800s are even more loosey-goosey, but reporters then were the PR firm for the police stations. They had direct access to these evidence cases and sometimes would work in cahoots. And so the proposition that I had for Tim going into that episode was, I'm going to convince you that the Zodiac doesn't exist. This is something that was near and dear to my heart, and it took me a lot to wrap my head around. But as you walked away from it and realized that the same reporters were always reporting, and those same reporters had access to evidence lockers. And then if you look at all like the alignments of the cases and stuff, all they did was just cherry pick cases. They released report details when they wrote their letters that they would have seen in evidence because they saw the murder crime. And it was all fabricated. And that's why there's never been anything that's been materialized to that. So when you start to talk about Monroe and you start to talk about this conspiracy and the time frame of which he is out, I think there's plenty of examples through history of people showing blind allegiance to other people, especially if they feel like they owe them a debt of gratitude. Our buddy Melvin, God bless his soul for being born with such a terrible name, probably felt indebted, I think, at some degree to James Monroe when he steps down. So what you're saying about him then being gone, causing hell for this guy Warren to force him to set and say, hey, look, I can be your savior. This should have been me. That to me adds a lot of authenticity to the theory, except you told me there were 18 murders, that in 1891, James Monroe takes over in late 1888.
Right.
So where does the rest of the explanation come in?
Because the other murders that go to 1891 are not considered generally a Jack the Ripper murder.
Okay.
They don't generally fit the mold, if you will, of what is widely
well,
accepted
they-
as a
they
quote-unquote
may be.
Ripper murder.
They may be, but the publicity is no longer
Loosely.
there, right?
Right.
So, I mean,
Actually,
why-
I want to go... Yeah, go ahead. Finish your thought. I don't want to jump in.
I was just saying, why did the police stop the extra foot patrol in November just
Right.
after Mary Kelly's murder when Monroe took over?
I
Took
didn't know why
over
those
from,
two.
took over from Warren. So he
Right.
got fired from he resigned under Warren, but then he came back and he became the the director of the CID.
So what's really interesting about that too, Tom, is that Mary Kelly, and correct me if I'm wrong, but Mary Kelly was the most, talking about the canonical five, the most gruesome of all the murders, right? Mary Kelly, you could have there. Oh, I see
100%.
the wheels turning there. Maybe
Yeah,
I'm wrong.
100%.
So I mean,
100%.
you could look up photos, right? I mean, her face is literally ripped off.
Everything's
I mean,
ripped
she's
off.
unrecognizable.
Yeah.
Everything. I mean, she's literally dissected from head to toe. It's one of the most gruesome crime scenes ever in the history of the planet, right? And so what I find really interesting about that, Tom, is that you have this culmination of murders that quote unquote ends with the most gruesome of all murders. And then all of a sudden, a week later, to your point, the police presence goes away. How does that make any sense?
Exactly. And the one thing, like, of the canonical murders, right? Mary Kelly is the only one of the five that was killed inside. And so that's
Yes.
the theory why she was so brutalized, because Jack had all
Right.
the time.
He had
in the
all
world.
the time.
Like Martha
Right.
Tabram's in early August was killed inside also. But she was like stabbed multiple times. But I think the Mary Kelly being so gruesomely done, and again, nobody knows, right? But I mean,
Right.
if it seems to me like a crime of passion more than a crime of insanity.
Right.
If you're insane, like, this person's dead, how do you get out? I mean, how do you get out after that? Like you're not, like, if you're like just killing somebody for killing's sake, you would probably stay there
Sure.
and like, eat the liver or what, I mean, but like, how did this person go out and close the door and get it? But if it was out of rage, and passion, then you do that, and then you go fuck, and you say, I got to get out of here. I mean, it's all speculation. I
Right.
just find
Sure.
I find the fact that, like, Monroe takes over from Warren on November 8th, right? So Monroe resigns from being the assistant and commissioner, and then he comes back to be the commissioner. So he resigns in August. He comes back as replacing his boss, who he hated, on November 8th. Mary Kelly's killed the night of 9th. And then the police just stop.
There's no reason to patrol anymore because the Ripper is gone.
Because
Yeah.
because in my police theory, because I've got a number of theories, like in my police theory, he knows that it's over. I got worn out, and we lost a few unfortunates.
Right.
And one thing that I haven't mentioned is when Monroe stepped down, he had McNaughton replace him.
So he
You know what I
basically
find really
gave the
interesting
job
about
to
that?
somebody.
Yeah, so thank you
Right.
for doing all that for me.
Yeah,
Here's it for
yeah.
you.
Right.
I mean, I'm
what
not-
I find really
Sorry, Tim.
Yeah. No, it's fine. It's fine. What's interesting about that theory, Tom, is that what Shane and I have discovered over probably a year of doing this and really deep diving into these conspiracies is that those in power, or those that seek power, will stop at nothing to get power. And to your point, right, you just described them as unfortunates. A few unfortunate souls, to reference The Little Mermaid. What do they care? He got what he wanted. He got what he needed. Those were people that won't be missed. They were in the doldrums of society. Nobody will miss them. And now he gets to live in his white palace, his white tower, and live out his career. So why not? So I think that fits perfectly. It's super interesting, dude.
Yeah, and in my opinion, I think David Cohen was one of Jack the Ripper. I think there's strong evidence that would show that he.
So you think he was a patsy?
Oh, I think
A fall guy?
Okay, if I'm going to go forward with this kind of theory, I think there was like maybe 2 or 3 people that the police would have come and put as the murderers. Like they had access to prisoners in insane asylums. right? So, and then
Right.
there's Montague Druitt is another individual who was depressed, and they at the time they put it on him. He committed suicide in November of, I think, of '88. He wasn't found for a month later because he
Yep.
drowned in the Thames by putting rocks in his clothes and everything. So he wasn't found for a month later. But the whole point, like, I mean, the most fascinating aspect of the Ripper cases to me is, why did they stop? Like, why?
Always,
Sure.
yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I mean, okay, you start and then you escalate, and that's what the typical theory is, right? Oh, they escalated.
Yeah.
He needed more to get more, and but why did he stop? That to me,
But
that's
Tom,
the biggest thing.
what if it was H.H. Holmes and he just went back to America? I'm sure you've heard of that
Yeah,
theory.
or Francis Tumblety. Yes, I know both of
Yeah.
those guys. Yeah.
Tumblety.
Yeah. Okay.
So,
yeah.
I
mean,
think-
Holmes.
yeah.
I don't think the time when he was in England matches quite well. Like, Holmes is the guy from
No, it
Chicago,
doesn't.
right?
It doesn't.
He's the guy.
Holmes
from
is the
Chicago,
He had the murder castle in Chicago during the
Yeah.
World's Fair in the late 1800s. Now, to me, I'm also fascinated with H.H. Holmes, also known as Henry Herman Mudgett,
Yep.
who is widely accepted as America's first serial killer, or at least America's first known serial killer. And there's a theory out there, because he did travel to London. We know that happened. Although, Tom, to your point, the dates don't really match up very well. But H.H. Holmes had what is dubbed the murder castle, which was essentially, and I don't want to go off on too much of a tangent here, a hotel with trap doors and dead ends. And I mean, this guy lured people, unsuspecting people into his hotel.
Nasty fuck.
Yes.
Nasty fuck.
Yes.
Yeah, he's
Yes.
like,
yeah. There's a fantastic book out there. I didn't know the name of the author, but the book is called Devil in the White City. And if you are in the slightest bit intrigued by H.H. Holmes, it is one of the best reads you will ever have. Absolutely fascinating. I mean, the guy murdered children. I mean, at the end of his story, he murdered the I think it was the Peitzel children, which was a friend of his that we worked with. But in any event, it was there was a theory out there that because we know he was such a brutal killer here in America, he also traveled to London. Around the same point in time, but the dates don't necessarily match. I would love that to be true, because what a fantastic theory that is. You've got a killer on two separate continents. But yeah,
Francis
the dates don't really match up.
Francis Tumblety was another.
That's a good one,
American,
too.
Was considered a.
He was a doctor, right? An American doctor?
I don't think he had a.
Kind
I don't
of.
think he was. Yes, he thought he was a doctor.
A snake oil doctor? Yeah.
Yeah, but the problem with Tumblety was he was really, I mean, as a suspect, in my opinion, as a suspect, is he was a overtly flamboyant person. He was like loud and all over the place, and now he's going to go and crawl into dark places and not take publicity. It doesn't suit his persona in my mind. His timing is good, but one thing is interesting is if you think that it could be just arbitrary people, it could easily be sailors who are now in port for the weekend, and they're on leave, and it could be a whole bunch of different people. It could be 7 different killers.
Sure, but it feels
What
more
would be the motive
calculated
behind
than
that?
that, doesn't it?
That's why I think the I mean, but like I'm here, like what's the name of this show again? Conspiracy Realist. So I thought I'd throw out a conspiracy about the cops, because I've always thought that this was a possible answer. But again, anybody who knows, like everybody says they don't know.
Yeah. Look, to your point though, you've got 18 murders within that year. Why are we focusing on this very small group of them?
Because
why
of
does
press.
the media exactly, and why does the press stop at a certain point? Why does the police presence stop at a certain point? And those are big factors, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because if Jack the Ripper, to this day, truly, we don't know the real identity of Jack the Ripper. Jack the Ripper was never caught, especially at the time that the murders were occurring. They were never pinned on one specific person. So why did it all end? So I think your theory is very interesting.
And well, in my opinion, another interesting fact is that of the individuals that I've mentioned, with the exception of Warren, they all put out a suggestion of who it may be, right? Anderson said it was
Right.
Kosminski, and I think it was Kosminski. But they all three of them who were involved said, "Oh yeah, we know Jack the Ripper's gone, and it was this person," or they drowned in the Thames, which was Druitt, right? And they
Right.
never, like, all three of them have different people
Yeah.
and so that's what I think what the total ambiguity of the whole situation is, the fact that if it's not one person, if it's a bunch of people doing it, then it's easy to say, oh, it's not him because he couldn't have been there, he was over here, or it can't be him,
Right.
he was over there. But if you put them all as one, you'll never catch them.
Well, that leans itself really well to if you are trying to create a conspiracy to get yourself back into a position of power, right? And you need to take all the scent off of you. You do want to misguide and mislead by pointing the finger in different directions, because
Right.
then all of your resources are looking in these different directions at other people, and there's never going to be a second guess on
Right.
you itself.
And in
I
my-
want to actually...
In my theory, just to like one more thing. In my
Yeah.
theory, Monroe just wanted to like ruin Warren, and
Right.
and he used McNaughton to get to his press friends to
As
make,
his inside
to make
man.
it
Yeah.
a big deal.
I want to bring back up David Cohen, because you've mentioned him multiple times, and I think the missing link for me is, how is he connected to all of this? Did he have a direct connection to James Monroe or to our boy Melvin? Like, where does he fall into this picture?
He doesn't. However, in March of '88, he is diagnosed with syphilis, and supposedly he started going a little batshit crazy and blaming hookers for his ailment. And then,
Right.
he progressively got worse and worse. His family put him into an insane asylum. I think. I mean, I don't know what they would call him back then, but I think that's the word. And so he was in the insane asylum, in and out during that time. Now, and I. Yeah, I'm not gonna. Anyway, yeah. So I mean, just
So
check
you're
out.
saying, what are you going at? What are you going at? You can't do that.
Check out the dates. Check out the deaths, and
Tom, is David Cohen?
Sorry,
Is David Cohen the same person as Kosminski?
Kosminski, not Kosminski.
Aaron Kosminski. Sorry, Aaron Kosminski. We're talking about the same person there.
No. Aaron
Okay.
Kosminski is a different person. Nathan
Got it.
Kosminski is David Cohen.
Understood. Okay.
Yeah, and I think the confusion comes because I don't think Kosminski was involved at all, but Anderson, what's the name? Robert Anderson. He said, "Oh, it was a Polish Jew named Kosminski." So I mean, it's quite easy.
Right.
I mean, like he's a shithead friggin' upper echelon white guy saying, "Oh yeah, I don't know, Kosminski," like a bit like Archie Bunker kind of thing. Yeah, so I don't think Kosminski is there. I mean, like he's around. He died in 1889. Kosminski did.
Yes.
Right. So I think the interest in Kosminski was because of the confusion with Kosminski, who is David Cohen, is a alias of David Cohen. But just think about that. Think about like, oh, it's Kosminski, David Cohen. Like, I mean, like we're in 1888. I mean, like we're not, like there's not a ton of I don't know, like high end police officers back there and detectives.
Right. I
Got
mean,
a
forensics
theory.
didn't even exist back then. Yeah.
No.
Let's go. Let's hear your theory.
I'm doing some research here because I can't help but think back to our serial killer episode when we first started this whole podcast journey off, and we did an episode on serial killers and their ties to MK Ultra. You know what MK Ultra is, Tom?
No.
So MK Ultra was a government conspiracy. It's a proven program that the United States government was using, the intelligence community, the CIA, to mind control people. It actually, it's on record. It's been released. It actually happened. They were doing mind control.
Yeah, it's not a theory at this point.
Is that the guys with goats?
It could be. Yes, it could be tied. There's a lot of variations of it.
That was part of it. Yes.
Right. So, in essence, what it was doing was psychological experimentation. I can't help but think. So I asked, what's David Cohen's relationship to all this? And then you said that he was put into an insane asylum. A large, I think.
And all the killings were done on the weekend.
Are they out on the weekends?
I don't know.
I don't know either. But I know that there was a lot.
Are they out on certain holidays on the weekends? I don't know either.
I would assume they're not supposed to be out at all. Having said that, if you're a movie buff like myself, you love kind of science fiction type stuff, you love that like creepy crap, you always get these like older films where when insane asylums were actually happening, you always hear these stories of human experimentation. Yeah. And it's been proven time and again that human experimentation went on in that point. I started looking up to see if there happened to be any black hat type programs that happened in the late 1800s, early 1900s. Lobotomies were really popular. Electroconvulsive therapy, ECTs, began in the 1930s. That's on public record now.
Lobotomies was huge. It's part of the movie From Hell and the book From Hell. Yeah.
Well, so that's sort of where I'm going now with this is you start to connect the dots a little bit here. And again, this is all speculative. I don't know if this is true or not. Somebody can be out there fact checking me. Don't mind. But you got James Monroe now, who's in a position of influence, and he doesn't get the role he wants to get.
And then he's not in a position of influence between August and November of 1880.
Right. And that aligns really well. However, when you're in a position of influence for any part of your career, you don't lose all your contacts. Then, pretty much aligned to that timeline, David Cohen goes into an insane asylum in an era where doctors were, for lack of a better word, had no morals, morally devoid. And they're most likely
butchering
doing
people.
Right. And they're doing human experimentations. So now I'm leaning in and thinking of what you were saying before, Tom. Here's a guy that dislikes prostitutes. He's blaming them from all of his ailments. There's probably a doctor there that's experimenting on him. And then you have another guy that is looking for a patsy, more or less, to do his dirty work to get himself back in. Is it out of the realm of possibility that they were doing early versions of MK Ultra, which we know is a U.S. government program, which we know that's not the only country in the world that did it, and we know that the MK Ultra program dates back to the 1930s, which means it probably dates back.
It dates back to Nazi Germany.
Right. It's gone on for many, many years under different names. So is it plausible that Monroe knows somebody in the insane asylum? From being in law enforcement, he should have a direct connection, a direct line to somebody over there.
Yeah, I mean, I think
he recruits Cohen.
Yes,
Cohen
I agree. I just don't think it's as in depth as that is. I just think it's someone. It's like I need someone to do this.
Well, that's what I mean. Like,
right?
he calls
I mean,
up a doctor,
I don't
and
think
he gets some nut job.
Yeah, I think it's quite probable that's. I mean, it's way better than Lewis Carroll.
I don't know who that is.
Agreed.
Oh, that's the
Alice in
the author of
Alice in Wonderland. Right,
Alice in Wonderland. Yeah, that's a pretty fantastic theory that I personally, as well, Tom, don't subscribe to at all.
Then there's the whole.
I do have a
Mason
question,
theory, right?
Yeah, the Mason theory is interesting as well. I do have a question though, because a large part of your theory, Tom, resides around the press and the media coverage of it. So the Dear Boss letter. Well, it's intricate. It certainly has a lot to do with it, right? Yep. The Dear Boss letter was the first letter from the quote-unquote supposed Jack the Ripper, right?
Right.
And I genuinely don't know the answer to this. You're a much bigger ripperologist than I am. Was the media covering the Ripper cases before the Dear Boss letter, or was that when they first started to cover it?
No, they were covering it prior to that. I think the Dear Boss, and you have to forgive me because I mean it's been a while since I've looked into all of these details and and Jack the Ripper is so leveled, right?
We're drinking cocktails. I'm hitting my vape. We're hanging out, having a good time. Don't worry about it.
I believe the gentleman's name was Lush, and he was one of the head of one of these vigilante committees, and it is conceived that he's the one that wrote the Dear Boss letter.
And for anybody that doesn't know, that's listening, and this is your first introduction to Jack the Ripper, or maybe you haven't thought about it in quite some time, the Dear Boss letter was the first letter that was supposedly written by Jack the Ripper himself. It was titled Dear Boss, that's why it's called Dear Boss, and it was written to, I think it was the police of London.
Police, yep.
Right, and just like the Zodiac letters, essentially taunting the police, saying, "Hey, buddy, it's me.
Yeah.
You ain't gonna get me." And I'm
Here, I've
obviously
got the letter right
paraphrasing.
here. I'm going to read the thing
There you
for
go.
you.
Read it, baby.
Yep.
Dear
It's
Boss.
a short letter. Yep.
It's actually way
It is
shorter
short.
than it looks because it's handwritten, so it looks much longer. Dear Boss, I keep on hearing the police have caught me, but they won't fix me just yet. I have laughed when they look so clever and talk about being on the right track. That joke about leather apron gave me real fits. You can tell this is Old English.
Michael
I am
Kidd.
down on whores, and I shan't quit ripping them until I do get buckled. Grand work the last job was. I gave the lady no time to squeal. How can they catch me now? I love my work, and I want to start again. You will soon hear of me with my funny little games. I saved some of the proper red stuff in a ginger beer bottle over the last job to write with, but it went like thick glue, and I can't use it. Red ink is fit enough, I hope. Ha ha. The next job I do, I shall clip the lady's ear off and send to the police officers just for jolly, wouldn't you? Keep this letter back till I do a bit more work, then give it out straight. My knife's so sharp, and I want to get to work right away if I get a chance. Good luck, yours truly, Jack the Ripper, on X at Conspiracy on X. Wow, I didn't know they had hex handles back then.
No, they didn't, but that's
Now think about that. Okay, think about what you just read. That sounds like a letter from a movie, does it not?
For sure.
That is so captivating and fantastical. I don't even know if that's a real word.
yes, it is.
That it would capture the minds. Thank you for being smarter than I, Tom. Capture the minds and hearts of millions around the globe. It is so well written, and I think that just adds to the lore of this case, right?
Well, how does
when
an
you
insane
read
person
those
write
letters,
that? How does an insane person
exactly.
write that, right? I mean, they don't.
Right.
Right. So, I mean, there's just
right?
so many.
That's something out of a screenplay. That's something out of a screenplay.
Yeah. Yeah. There it is.
What I think is most mesmerizing about this is just how beautiful this. I mean, this is calligraphy. This handwriting.
Yep,
it
absolutely.
looks fake. This actually looks like a computer did this with a font. Look at how perfect this is.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think you got to take into consideration that people were writing only, by hand at that point in time. I don't even know if the
understand that.
typewriter was
But
around
it-
yet.
but-
It might have been. I don't know.
But if you're poor, you didn't go to school, and you don't write
Right.
in script.
Like, this isn't something you're
Right.
writing in a shack somewhere hiding out. Like, this is somewhere where
Right.
you sat down, you had time to think about this, you write it. And I actually
Right.
find it hilarious that he writes, haha, in 1888.
This isn't
this
this
guy's
isn't the writing of
"Ha-ha."
a Polish Jew immigrant, right? Who's in an insane asylum.
Right,
Correct.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, I'm not sure. In my opinion, I don't think any of the letters are from Jack the Ripper. I think they're from other individuals. It might be. It might be from one of the other killers to try to send them off in different directions. Michael Kidney, like you've heard of Leather Apron, right, Tim? I mean, Leather Apron was
Yes.
one. So Michael Kidney was one of his nicknames was Leather Apron, and he was Liz Stride's boyfriend / husband.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wild. It's funny coming into this, Tom. And granted, I wouldn't even consider myself a ripperologist. I'm somebody who, on a very
If you're interested, Shane's a ripperologist now.
now he is.
Yeah,
I'm
holy
somebody on a very amateur level who is just fascinated with the subject.
Same here.
Due to reasons that I described earlier, but I had never thought, or I'm sorry, I'd never heard of your theory before, and it's kind of blowing my mind right now.
Yeah.
It really is, because based upon all the research that I've done, the books that I've read, the shows that I've watched, they all pin a lunatic, right? Just some lunatic who is out for blood.
Think
Right.
about what the opposite side is. It's like it's unbearable almost, right?
Sure.
It's like, oh my God, it's got to be
Right.
a lunatic. It has to be a lunatic, right?
Sure.
Right.
Sure. You're right. Yeah. It's fantastic.
And it's Victorian
like-
England. We're not talking. We're talking at before Downton Abbey came on. Just like a couple of years before. Like we're really close to that era. I mean, in Victorian England.
Listen, at that point in time, the World's Fair in Chicago was going on, and one of the big attractions at the World's Fair in Chicago was what? Electricity. Okay, so think about that for a moment. That this is the time period that we're talking about. People were using candles to light their home. You talked about it earlier, Tom. They were using street lamps to light the streets of London, right? The gas street lamps. So I mean, it's just such a different period of time, and to me, like I've talked about this many times. I love history. I romanticize the Victorian times. I love it. I don't know why it captivates me. There's something about it. I love it. I mean, I think, Shane, when you and I talked about time travel, one of the things I said, I'd love to go back to that time period. I couldn't even tell you why.
But the 1880s
I like
were
it.
most insane. It was such an incredible era, right? It was like the decade was nuts. I mean, I was talking earlier about the OK Corral. You've got all the Western stuff going down in the United States. You have like Jack the Ripper. The 1880s were like Edison. Edison steals Joseph Swan's invention and takes credit for the light bulb. And he didn't steal it. They were just they found it at exactly the same time. Discovered the same time. Yeah, Joseph Swan was a few months ahead, but anyway, we're not going to go into that. But
That's another conspiracy for another episode.
no, it's not a conspiracy.
Off
Off
the topic of Jack the Ripper for a second, you mentioned OK Corral. Have you seen? There is an awesome. I think it's fantastic. There's a really cool docu-series on Netflix called Wyatt Earp and the Cowboy Wars. Have you seen that?
No, I'd love to see it. 'Cause it's pretty cool. Yeah.
Oh, dude, you've got to check it out.
I will.
It is awesome.
Wyatt Earp
It
and the
is
Cowboy
such a good
Wars?
docu-series.
Yeah.
Yes, it's called Wyatt Earp and the Cowboy Wars, and it documents the shootout at the OK Corral
And the fight with the Cowboys,
proceedings
right?
leading up to it. Yes, the proceedings leading up to it, and then what occurred after it. It is fascinating. I binged it in one night. It is awesome. You got to check it out.
I'm going to for sure, 100%.
Has nothing to do with our episode, but it's really
the same era though. That's 18 like early.
It is the same era.
But yeah.
But isn't it so wild to think that those two, I don't want to call them civilizations, but those two, I guess, ways of living were occurring at the same point in time, and they were on the opposite ends of the spectrum, right? Isn't that fucking nuts to think about?
Opposite ends of the spectrum, but I mean, but again, London was the hub for everybody, so all refugees went to London. So right. So, but in New York City in the 1880s, like you're looking at Edison and Westinghouse, right? So I mean, it's pretty civilized there. But when you go out into the West and into Kansas and then in the Midwest down further south, it was all new territory at that time. And one interesting thing was on November 6th, 1888, Americans, Grover Cleveland lost the election, and he was the first president to lose an election and then win the next one.
Yeah.
So he was the 22nd
was.
and 24th president of the United States, and on November 6th, 1888, Grover Cleveland lost the election as an incumbent.
Interesting.
Who'd
so
have
that's,
thunk it?
I mean, that's where we are. I mean, we're in that kind of era. But
I like things that make sense, right? And so that's why I kind of like this theory a lot, because we always go back to Occam's razor. Sometimes
100%.
The simplest answer is the correct one.
Yep.
And you don't have to. A lot of the times with any conspiracy theory out there, whether it's from serial killers all the way up to moon landings, things like that, sometimes you're really trying to fill in a lot of blanks with the unknowns. And we discuss this all the time. The problem with doing that is you can be right on 99% of all the details. All you have to be wrong on is one. And then your conspiracy is debunked. Nobody pays attention to it. So the more you can minimize the things you have to speculate on, the more they make sense. And so that's why, like, right. There's a lot of loopholes still, or a lot of holes still in the Monroe story. But the timeline of it makes sense. I think the alignment to David Cohen, and then you said some of the other prisoners, that makes sense as a way to kind of loop people in, that you can kind of get in there, do some dirty work, and then probably off them. You put them back in the insane asylum, that nobody's going to believe them, or they have an illness,
or you put stones in their pants and everything and throw them in the
and they end up in the bottom
and
of
throw them in the
river.
Thames River.
Yeah. So that's what I like about it the most. I think for sure.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think we'll ever find out who Jack the Ripper was. But I mean, first of all, I disagree. I am very comfortable suggesting that Liz Stride was not killed by the Jack the Ripper.
Sure.
And I am less sure that Mary Kelly is. I believe they were both killed by. I believe Liz Stride was killed by Michael Kidney, and I believe that
by Michael.
Yeah, and by and Mary Jane Kelly was killed by Joseph Barnett.
I do need to really, really quick, just in case the algorithm tags him, David Cohen, Cy Young Award pitcher for the New York Mets and New York Yankees. In the 80s
this is
90s.
David Cohen. Cohen.
We are not.
Right.
We are not talking about you.
Hey,
we're not talking about you, Coney.
Hey,
we're not talking about you, Coney.
David Cohen, 1992 Blue Jays. You are my favorite pitcher. I loved you. Thanks for Game 6.
Lord.
Love you, Dave Cohen. Dave Cohen, sorry.
Let's go.
Yeah.
Listen, Tom and I are you know what, I'm announcing it now. Tom and I, we're gonna create a spin-off podcast. It's gonna be about Jack the Ripper and baseball, and we're fucking off to the races, baby. Good. Let's go. Shane, see you later.
I'm in for the Ripper part. The baseball thing I can live without. Tom, your journey has brought you here with Jack the Ripper. You've got all the research. You've done it for very many years. For me, the next obvious question is, where does your journey end? Are you satisfied with what you discovered? Do you think that if you keep digging, you might find something else? Or are you ready to kind of find another hobby and try your investigative journalism on something else?
I am
something new.
Always fascinated with speaking about this because it's not the Loch Ness Monster, right? Mm-hmm. It's not the Loch Ness Monster. People were killed. Mm-hmm. Right? Jack the Ripper is in print. I mean, it's real. So to speculate and to try to find that out, the Zodiac Killer, D.B. Cooper, all of these things, like these mysteries, they're what keeps me alive. When I was younger, I wanted to believe in the Loch Ness Monster and Sasquatch and all of that stuff, right? Because I want to believe that there's something out there that I don't know. And
well said.
And Jack the Ripper is... It's something I don't know. It's something anybody listening here, you don't know. I mean, nobody knows. So the speculation and to be able to have an intelligent or moderately intelligent conversation, if it's with me, and discuss these things openly and challenge your thinking. I love it. I mean, it's a great mind exercise.
It's Tim, fun. Coming into this, you were the big
fun.
Jack the Ripper guy here. Do you think your mind's changed? I mean, who was your initial thought of the Ripper?
So, initially, I didn't have any thought on who it was. Upon reading Russell Edwards' book titled Naming Jack the Ripper, I was pretty conclusive on the fact that it was Aaron Kosminski. Tom, again, if I'm fucking that last name up, let me know. I did believe that it was Aaron Kosminski because of the evidence that he puts forth in his book, which we haven't really talked about at all tonight. He acquired a shawl, which was from Catherine Eddowes, which, interestingly enough, is one of the canonical five who may and or may not have been victim
I think
of
is 100%
the true Jack.
Yeah, I think she's...
I agree. And so he utilized DNA samples from that shawl and compared them to DNA samples of descendants of both Aaron Kosminski and Catherine Eddowes, and came to the conclusion that it was a match. Therefore, it had to have been Kosminski.
However, like,
again,
think about DNA. Think about what DNA is. Like, if you touch that, your DNA is on that. So I mean, it is
right. There's a lot of problems with it.
Yeah, and there was
there's a lot of
Patricia
problems with it.
Cromwell, I think her name was. She had some like she went on and on that she knew who it was. I can't even remember who she is.
Yeah.
Anyway, call me up, dear. I mean, I don't like your book, so. But I mean, if you want, if you want to learn about Jack the Ripper, and without a shadow of a doubt, anybody who's listening, casebook.org is your starting point. It is the friggin' first Bible of Jack the Ripper. This book here, you need to read it. Donald Rumbelow, Jack the Ripper, the complete casebook. You need to go and see this book. This book is fabulous. Okay, so here's the mammoth book of Jack the Ripper.
It's a big boy.
I mean, it's very good. This is the encyclopedia. So if you're younger than I am and probably this age of Shane, and you've got an attention span of like 3 seconds, this is a good book for you because it's all in bullet points. And this is another one, Peter Ackroyd. So, I mean...
Jack in the East End. That's a good book.
I mean, I have another one here. I've got two, actually.
He's got a lot more than two, guys. Don't worry.
Yeah, I've got this one here, and I've got a ton of magazines from ripperologists. But casebook.org, that is an insanely amazing website.
It is.
Yeah.
It
That's
is.
awesome.
And I think just to finish my thought on who I thought it was,
Sorry
the
to
reason why... No, dude. Again, I'm fucking drinking whiskey. I'm smoking a vape. We're bullshitting. It doesn't matter. This is our podcast, baby. One of the things we talked about at the beginning of this was we fucking do what we want. It's all good, baby. So, going back to that, though, is that if you do research and you read those books, which are paramount in the world of Jack the Ripper, the difference between that and naming Jack the Ripper that Russell Edwards put out is that Russell Edwards used modern science to pin someone. And for me, that's what I found really interesting. Now, as I alluded to earlier, and you did as well, Tom, there's a lot of problems with that science. And at the time when that book was published, it wasn't initially. I mean, I read it like literally as soon as it came out, but I could not wait to get my hands on that book. I'm like, this dude knows who Jack the Ripper is. I'm fucking reading it, cover to cover as soon as it comes out, and I did. And at the time, it was mind blowing because the science in that book, and this I don't remember when it was published. Call it 10, 12 years ago.
I'm gonna get it. I'm gonna get it
before people. Yeah. Look, it's an interesting read regardless. Okay. Regardless of what theory you subscribe to, it's an interesting and certainly a worthy read. At the time, it wasn't widely criticized because it had just come out, right? And so, to me, that was just fascinating, right? You had somebody who, instead of just utilizing old documents and stories and accounts, was actually putting science in front of everything. And so I really, coming into this, Shane, I had believed that it was Aaron Kosminski because of that. Having said that, I've done research since then, and I know that, Tom, we talked about it. Yeah. The DNA, was the shawl even Catherine Eddowes? If it was, how many people had touched it over the years? There's lots of problems with mitochondrial DNA and the way that you utilize that. To pinpoint suspects. So there's a lot of problems with it. I still find it interesting. I'm not totally dismissing that.
Oh, no, they're all interesting because you can't say that they're wrong. I mean, I can't tell you that that person's wrong, right?
Right.
I mean,
and you know what? And that's probably the most fun part about this, Tom, is that for you and I, there's a very good chance that you and I will go to the grave without knowing definitively who Jack the Ripper was. And because of that, the mystery never ends. And that's kind of what's so fun about it, isn't it? Is that somebody else could come out tomorrow with another theory that's more interesting or exciting, or it just has something different to pique your brain and just spark a thought in a different way. And it just keeps the saga going, because as much as I want to know the truth at the end of the day. I almost don't want it to end because I like learning about it.
Yeah, no, I mean, I hear you. I mean, it's fascinating, and it keeps you thinking, right? It just keeps your brain going, and that's why I started that group when I turned 40, because I was just in a normal, a normal job. I didn't have to necessarily think a lot in that job. I've changed. I mean, I'm in a different profession now, but I didn't have to think a lot. It was, I'm not going to say menial because it wasn't menial at all, but I didn't have to, there wasn't a lot of challenges. And so I wanted to challenge myself. And then I started that group. We should start a group again if you want. I mean, I'd love to.
Tom, we've got him.
Yeah.
I'd love
We've
to do it.
got
I'm going to be
him.
40 soon.
Yeah.
I'll be 40 soon,
There you
Tom,
go,
and
there
we'll
you
start
go.
a new group.
Anybody who's listening, contact Tim and Shane, and let's start a group. Let's just start
Tom,
a Jack the Ripper group, okay?
You gotta re-download Signal, and there's groups up the wazoo there for you. You can join right on in. We've got our conspiracy theorist chat.
Oh no, I'm going to be
there.
in charge. I'm joking.
Go ahead. I'll give you full control.
No.
Deal with Glenguff. Listen, Tom, this has been awesome. I'm actually kind of glad that it took us this long to do this, because I think from our side, we've had a lot of time to kind of digest and mesh out our format. And I think that allowed us to kind of come into this not just pointing you with questions, but being comfortable enough. I mean, you and I have been friendly for a very, very, very long time at this point. So the conversation for us is always easy. But in a platform like this, I think it's much better. I didn't know what to expect coming into here.
Me neither.
I came in pretty dry. I don't know much about Jack the Ripper outside of the legend and the legacy. So this was fun for me. Certainly enlightening and learning a lot. I feel like this is something we can probably pull on many other times, and I think we probably will. Thank you for the time here. To anybody that's out there that has your theory, please go ahead and leave it in the comments on Spotify, YouTube, Rumble, X, Instagram. You can follow us everywhere. ConspiracyRealist.com will get you all those links nice and easy. Like, share, subscribe. Make Tom feel good. You know, like, you put all his effort in here. He's been doing this for what did you say, 20 years?
Yeah, 2002, 2003 I started, yeah.
So 20 years. Leave us a comment. Share this with a friend that's a Ripper fan over here. And we hope to see you all back again next time. For Cocktails and Conspiracies, my glass is kicked. But raise your glass to mysteries, ladies and gentlemen. We'll see you next time.
Hi-yo.